Hello everyone, welcome to SAP TechEd. My name is Ratna from Technologies and I'm the Chief Product Officer for KTern. And I'm here along with my great friend Sven. Sven?
Hey, welcome Ratna. Thanks for having me. My name is Sven Denecken, adding Marketing Solution Manager for Industries and CX. I'm happy to be part of this session. Take it away, Ratna.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you. And today I do a presentation on data-driven digital transformation enabled by RISE with SAP and KTern.AI. As a company, we have been in this business for the last 15 years. KTern as a solution, it's available as part of SAP Store. It's a SAP Spotlight partner, and we are also recognized by SAP as an industrial cloud solution. Today, we are going to talk more about how we can drive SAP transformations or digital transformations, where Sven would be talking about the industry convergence, so I'll leave that part to him to cover on that part. My role would be to discuss more about how much we could leverage the existing data that has been with the enterprise for the last 20, 30 years, and how do we make sense out of it using the latest tech, and how do we drive innovation and build intelligent enterprises using RISE with SAP and KTern.AI industry cloud solution. We also use a bit of GenAI, and I'll talk a bit about it. Okay, our digital transformation, we as a company, we started in 2006. We recently got funding from A91 for around 30 million. That shows about the kind of investment that we could drive within the SAP community in terms of driving the SAP enterprises to the new world from the existing ECC to SAP S4HANA, and how we go about driving that part. So we started in 2006 as a company, 4 friends, and we have been a pure play SAP consulting company for a long time. And, we have been driving this innovation and taking up the latest and the best industry practices to our customers along with SAP. And those are a few of the companies with whom we have driven some innovation, including Saudi Aramco and UiPath. But as we stand today and we are looking at what's driving the industry, if you really look at it, there's quite a lot of change that has happened post-corona. And we're looking at the way the processes that has got defined and how processes are getting redefined, the pace at which processes are changing, and how do we ensure that there are scalable end-to-end solutions that we could drive for the customers, how we could ensure data is being the driving force in terms of driving the digital transformation, then transformations happening in a very ad hoc way. It is not a one-time event digital transformation, it is a continuous thing, but then we have to start with the core, which is clean, and that's where KTern aligns with SAP in terms of ensuring that your existing programs, existing data, we take a relook at it, take a look at it and see how we can drive and assess the data that you have, and how we could bring in more harmony in terms of driving the digital transformation. My next slide talks about the overall scenarios in terms of how the convergence of industry happens and how the people, the process, the underlying technology, and when I mean the people, the way the workforce is driving the work at the place has changed. There are new working patterns that has evolved after COVID, and how do we ensure that the processes that has been laid out for the last 20, 30 years and the new process, the convergence of industries, which Sven will talk in detail, and how we could make a change in terms of ensuring that all the SAP products, right from SAP S4HANA, the SuccessFactors, the BTP platform, how do we leverage all that with the productivity tools of Google or Microsoft, and how do we ensure that we are able to increase the top line as well as the optimize the operational efficiency for the customer. So that how part is something that I'm going to talk about. But before that, I would like to invite Sven Denecken to talk about the industry convergence, and then I'll take it from there. Over to you, Sven.
Thank you very much. So first of all, Ratna, great to be here together with you and seeing an amazing evolution also what you're doing together with customers. So first of all, I'm happy to talk about what I see as trends, but you already touched one, which is digital transformation. And digital transformation, actually, we both know, is a journey. And that's great to have a vibrant ecosystem and also that knowledge coming to fruition in that change, in that journey of a digital transformation. But let's look at one trend that we discovered. If we look at the next slide, we analyzed a lot in the market, and by looking at millions of records about company registrations. We see movements between industries, and that's why I think convergence is a trend which just is, again, reinvigorating after Corona, you said, after all the hits we had in the industries. But we also see a positive evolution. Interdependence between industries always has been, right? Because reliance on each other has been there before. Convergence is actually something also we have seen before when companies expand beyond their traditional boundaries. But when you now factor in the digital transformation, this is truly where companies start to embrace digital technologies. Specifically, if we look at the opportunities with artificial intelligence all the way up to actually generative one, then you see that they actually now pivot into other industries depicted on that graph here, which is on really meaningful data that you see where those interdependencies happen and evolve with digital transformation to true convergence. And there are a couple of trends as well inside that we analyzed, one being sustainability. Sustainability in the means of interacting with the client, looking at the entire supply chain, looking at actually all the tiers that evolve, not only knowing that CO2 going to be a currency, also knowing that there is an educated consumer, which brings me to one more trend, like the customer centricity. Companies really are focusing on creating that seamless, personalized experience across industries. And on the next slide, I will try to give a very tangible example that we're working on where we call it energy retail. Imagine fuel stations, and fuel stations have been around forever and will be around forever, but now we might have an electric car and you want to charge that there, and suddenly you're no longer an oil and gas company. You actually want to address the consumer and charge his car, which then you are a utilities company or a gas company. That said, you do the highest margin, by the way, with your retail store, not with charging the car or with fueling the car. And that always has been the case. But now if you take that convergence of consumer industry, retail industry, automotive into looking at the experience, suddenly if I charge my car in there 20 minutes, guess what you can do in 20 minutes, how much you can offer, how much retail experience you can get. So basically you see retail stores now charging or charging stations getting to mega retail stores. And that's truly a business trend and a digital transformation par excellence. And if we go further, those transformations we see in many, many other areas. And on the next slide, I wanted to pick that a little bit because technology, of course, underpins, but it comes down to those next practices. And what I mean with next practices, we have 50 years of experience, and together with partners like you, we evolve those experiences, but there are truly some next practices where we can deliver those key innovations together. And that's what we do also with our industry cloud program, where you're part of, where we bring capabilities from the ecosystem us together to optimize the business processes, being it manufacturing, where again, an automotive side, many things change. Looking at predictive planning in retail, looking at revenue growth. So it's about growth as well as about new market. Looking at things that have started to accelerate during pandemic, like clinical R&D, where in life sciences, complete new collaboration has happened. And this is super important to notice because this is something we're following and we're looking at each of those business model innovations. But we're doing that together with our ecosystem. If you go on the next slide, like we do here with KTern, there are many players that you need to look into. And it's very essential that with the ecosystem where you and us and with other partners we collaborate, it's essential to the success of our clients. And as we discussed, innovation thinking starts exactly there. So we really need to run that in a profitable way, but also that digital transformation is an innovation way. And this is where we're building alliances. And we're building alliances between partners, between ecosystems and also via technology. And if there's one technology everyone talks about, so we'll do here as well, if you go to the next slide, it is of course about artificial intelligence. And it is important that we understand that there is a huge benefit of this technology, and it has been around for a while, but with, I think, the sparking interest via generative AI, now everyone talks about it. So business AI, how we call it, is super important because it enriches the business process. It's not the technology you throw at the client or into a project. You need to ingrain it into the business processes because then you steer that agility. And this is where having it built in is much better than put it on top or bolt it on. And we have industry-specific data we're working both on, and you will of course talk about that, how you do that as well. And that is important to us because there are three fundamentals that we are pushing from an SAP together with our ecosystem when we talk about business AI. It's built in all of our processes. It needs to be relevant and derive value, not just technology around. And it needs to be responsible and trustworthy. And this is what we're doing together. So let me sum it up with the next slide, where also everyone can start to look at our solutions landscape from a business process point of view. So with that SAP Solutions Scout tool, which we have launched already as Sapphire, you can not only see the end-to-end business process, you can also now engage it with a view with the partner solution on top of that. Because the white spaces need to be visible and embedded in that value app. We bring that, we show that in our experience center, which I would happy to invite everyone together with your partner. With that, Rabna, back to you, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Sven. Thanks for your time. And it's important, and you bring up the point of industry convergence with the next practice and how AI is redefining the way industries work. And that's where most of our investment also, along with SAP, how we are trying to do with KTern.AI. Thanks for your time, Sven. Really appreciate it. So now coming back to KTern.AI, as we mentioned, I stopped with the house slide of how we combine the people, the process, and then you have a set of industries and how that's converging in terms of the business processes and how the technology can play a role in terms of converging all this. So that's where we come into play in terms of driving this change for industries with a set of data points that we have gathered over a period of 15, 20 years of driving business along with the SAP data. And how do we make sense out of that ERP data or the SAP data that's available? And how do we ensure that new processes can be built over and how it can be made continuous and how that can bring in more productivity? So that's the overall idea of KTern. But the key here is hyper data automation or data-driven digital transformation is the key word that, and I will also talk about few use cases. Let me also go to the next slide where I talk about the challenges in terms of the digital transformation and what is happening right now. So if you really look at this infinite loop and what this talks about the whenever a CIO gets into driving the transformation for his company or her company, the first thing that comes into mind is, what do I do with the existing data? How many processes are currently running? Do I need to drive it with a set of consultants or a workshop, run it for 6 months? Or can I use a product and try and understand the businesses that's effectively being used and what needs to be replaced? And how do I make a business case out of it? So we call it DX, digital transformation, DX planning. The second part would be making a project plan out of that and doing a governance or a program that can run for 1 or 2 years. And in some cases, doing it at the LOB level is also a possibility. And then how do I orchestrate this whole data that's available with me and how do I take it to the business users and how do I drive value and how do I measure the metrics in terms of the new changes that has come in? Has it improved the end user's life? Has it improved the productivity? Has it improved the optimization? Am I changing the way that business is being done? Not for the sake of embracing technology, as Sven said, but is there a real value that is being driven or not? And then how do I replace, or how do I ensure that I lay out a process by this industry convergence, for example, and how do I ensure this there are testing that is happening? How do I increase the IT cost, or how do I ensure that the cost that is spent on the IT is optimized? So these are the challenges that currently faced, and with respect to the the disparate system of records and the industry challenges, that's where we bring in KTern, where we have a stream for each of these processes in a customer journey, starting from the planning to the run mode. So we have 5 streams as part of it. We have digital maps, which does the planning for you. And then we have digital projects, where you could do the governance in terms of how my particular digital transformation program is running and how it is continuously being monitored. It's got a bit of collaboration. And then I have a process orchestration. End of the day, projects has to drive the process in terms of ensuring that there is continuity in terms of processes, the processes that is being held by the objects, and how effective are they used by my end users, my business users, how am I driving value for my department, my company, and how do I ensure if there are any new processes that I need to embrace, and how do I ensure that it is having the best practices or the next level practice that Sven was talking about. And then how do I test it continuously when the process change, and how do I optimize as we go along in terms of having it in the run mode. So this is our platform, KTern, and it's completely data driven. Around 15-20 years of intelligence built into it. We call it the tribal knowledge, where it has got a knowledge base built on top of it. It is of course integrity led, meaning it is API driven, and it sustains to the SAP standard. It's not at the table level, but it's more at the business process API driven application is what we have. It can be used by the SAP customers, the SAP partners, and also we have our own digital bots that can be deployed to ensure that each and every processes that's currently running, or what is the new process that can be brought in, what is the next practices that's available within SAP that aligns with the RISE with SAP. So that's how this whole industry cloud KTern solution is. Before I go into the use cases, I just wanted to talk a bit about the different terminology that's been used in the industry right now. We have IaaS, which is Infra as a Service. Of course, that's more on the bare metal and the networking and the computing part of it. And then we have PaaS, which is basically your platform as a service, where it can come until the runtime and the OS level. And SaaS would be your application layer and the data and runtime. What we realized was with SAP S4HANA, RISE with SAP or Grow with SAP, and if we could slap DXaaS, which is Digital Transformation as a Service, and we have 5 streams that can work along this layer, and we are able to deliver value for the customer. Of course, the normal way of doing it is, deploying a set of team and driving it to the workshop and driving value for the customer. But here we are depending upon the data that is already present, and there's a huge investment that's been done by the customers in terms of the custom objects and the integration that has happened. So what do we do with that? How do we ensure that we make sense out of it? And that's how we came up with, and we ourselves have faced those concerns and issues, and that's how we came up with this product. This is the stack. Again, it's got an analytical layer, it's got a mining layer, it's got a knowledge base layer. It's non-invasive, meaning you don't have to put any probe into the existing system. It operates through the RFP. It is mainly through the API layer, and we are working with SAP, integrating with the cloud ALM as well. We are also trying to work on doing a clean core in terms of using the generative AI. That's a use case that we are co-innovating along with SAP and few other hypercloud providers as well. So the idea is to bet more on the data that's available, and that's all more structured data. We are not even talking about unstructured data. We have millions and millions of structured data. We can really drill it down to the nth level in terms of processes, starting from order to cash to credit or a debit memo processing. So right from SAP calls it global scope items, and we also stick to that. In the GSI, from L1 to L6, we could make a sense of that existing data that's available, and what is that we need to change using all these stack that we have as part of the industry cloud solution. We recently got certified for the industry cloud with the SAP, and we take this moment to thank SAP there. But the idea is to drive more efficiency, because we realize with the deadline approaching, there would be more automation, more tool that's required to move the existing customers from their existing ECC to SAP S4HANA in the rise with SAP. So that requires some kind of an automation, some kind of a tool, and that's a reason why we came up with this tool. Again, we make sense of data. We believe in data. So we have got a profiler which could analyze all your existing data, kind of get you a business blueprint document kind of a thing in terms of how the organization is mapped, how the purchase organization is mapped, how the different plans are mapped, and build a complete enterprise structure mining. And all this terabytes of data can be handled, and the max time to generate the analytics out of this data is within a week's time, right? Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 days. We are able to make sense out of the existing data, and all that we need is as I mentioned before, it's non-invasive. So this is one of the use cases where you can drive a business case of the existing data and generate a compelling reason on why and how we move to rise with SAP, and what are the different ways that we can achieve it, and then how we can continuously keep driving it. So we are also part of the adoption acceleration program for rise with SAP, and also we have integrated with SAP Cloud AI. So we augment, we support, we align with SAP in terms of driving it. Now, this is the second use case where you can do a complete organization change management in terms of driving the change that's coming up. You can have typically driving the SAP projects, it's a shared responsibility, it's shared accountability of we as a system integrator, we as a partner, and then the customer and SAP coming together to ensuring that the ROI is there in terms of moving to the new world. And then how do we leverage on the technology which is evolving at the speed of light, or even faster than that, the likes of AI, the likes of ML, the generative AI, the way the business can be done and the way the processes are changing. How do we ensure that the new way of doing business, and how do we ensure that the users are able to leverage on these new changes? All that can be measured. So you put a process in place, and it's not the end of it. You have to ensure that it is effectively used. We keep giving a nudge to the user on how the things have changed. So maybe they had 10 steps earlier, maybe they are doing the 3-4 steps, a particular process, and how effective is that? Or do we need to do any other change? That's the kind of orchestration that we can do along with rise with SAP. Of course, it can be the deployment options are plenty. It can leverage on BTP, or it can be on any of the SAP products that we have. This is about optimizing it. So change is an inevitable thing, be it SAP or be it real life. And how do we ensure that we are able to manage that change? So any processes that has been put in place, any changes that happens in terms of the objects that has been configured for a particular customer, how do we ensure that it's not a test all mentality? You are only able to test only the chain that has come in. And how do we ensure that we are able to reduce the testing effort? How do we ensure only a certain set of test cases? If you have 100 test cases, you can just test only 20. You don't have to go through the testing all the 80 test cases. So that's what we drive it with this offering as part of KTern, where you can simulate the test data, you could reduce the test cases, and you could ensure that you are able to identify at the object level, if you want, at the lowest level, and map it to the process level at the highest level. All that is possible using KTern. We have integration with the leading automation products as well. And so together, I mentioned about 3 use cases. How do we create a compelling business use case? How do we ensure that the processes are redefined, relayed, and how we can test it, and how we can ensure that the change management is handled properly. Of course, these are all that is possible within the 5 streams that's part of KTern. So with KTern, the industry cloud platform, and we trust in the data that is there. We trust in the integrity that SAP has built in over the last 50 years in terms of how the data resides. We trust in the value alone, and not just pushing the technology for the sake of taking it to the customers, but if you have a clean core, if you are able to ensure that the 80% of the offering that comes with the SAP and the 20% might be customer specific, but then with the next practices that Sven is talking, and with the rise of the SAP offering, where the enterprises can be, the intelligent enterprises and the next gen evolving in terms of industry cloud, where the convergence is happening, we should be able to build a resilient, connected industries, and should look forward to any kind of volatility or the shocks that the market is throwing at us. But that's what we are driving towards along with SAP. And thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Ratna, and thanks for having me again as well. Let's do a lot of digital transformations together for the clients. I'm looking forward to that.